We start with Detective William Somerset investigating a crime scene just a week before he's set to retire, as his newbie partner Detective Mills turns up, fresh-faced, wide-eyed and ready to get shit done, son. After the opening credits and a title card telling us it's a gloomy Monday in a rather ambiguous indeterminate city, Somerset decides he don't want no stinking coffee from some Brad Pitt looky-likey fella, as the new dynamic duo, with a pretty tense dynamic to be fair, investigate their first murder together. Turns out some Chris Christie cosplayer has totally gone and eaten himself to death, and then drowned in his own SpaghettiOs.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiO!
That's right. Anyway, Somerset tells his noob partner to shut up thinking out loud about his amateurish crime scene observations and to go do some basic door knocking and shit. And later, said Mills fella totally bollocks him for humiliating him in front of his new colleagues and treating him like some low-level donut muncher and sending him off to do basic grunt work, because he's got his big boy badge now and everything. And over at the autopsy place, the coroner says someone likely threatened this fat bastard with severe violence and made him eat a bunch of shit food that he didn't want to. Kinda like my mum when I wouldn't eat my broccoli back in the day. Now confirming this was a homicide, and a pretty elaborate one at that, Somerset reckons there must be some sort of meaning to all this, and he don't mean how it's essentially a free advertisement for the benefits of Ozempic, but also asks to be reassigned, given this case is a big one and likely to go on well after his retirement in 6 days' time. But the police chief don't really believe it's a big deal, and just tells him to shut up and do his one job and get on with solving the murder already. Tuesday then rolls around and brings a bloody huge press storm given the grisly nature of the killing, only for Mills to walk into a second murder scene, and this time with the word greed scrawled in blood on the floor and some red rings drawn over the eyes on a pic of the dead dude's wife. Apparently, some corrupt lawyer was gutted like a common hog and totally bled dry this morning. And so naturally, Somerset just bangs on about wanting to retire even more, given he no longer understands the world, nor why there are drag queens forced onto every network show on TV these days. I mean, why everyone's so apathetic to moral degeneracy and stuff. Later, the chocolatey cop revisits the first crime scene, and finds the word gluttony alongside a note referencing John Milton's Paradise Lost poem behind the fat bloke's fridge. Yet despite still wanting off the case what will inevitably become a giant infamous shitstorm of epic proportions, he can't help but keep investigating and reading all about the Bible and them 7 deadly sinny things. The next morning on Wednesday, Mills does a naughty hate crime of his own by turfing out the local black man and nicking his office and chair, only for his wife to make it up to the fella by inviting his new yet soon to be departing partner over for dinner this evening. An invitation he gladly accepts, well given it's a free meal cooked up by a pretty blonde bird played by that weirdo gal who later go on and make candles what smell like a minge.
Bruh.
Naturally, Mills just can't believe she essentially asked his own partner out on a date in their own house without telling him, especially given their new gaff keeps shaking worse than Michael J. Fox, well after their real estate agent totally did him up like kippers, not telling him that it's directly next to a railway line and thus totally embarrassing him in front of his new work buddy. Because exposing his total naivety when it comes to apartment purchasing is like super embarrassing, bro. Especially now this fella's laughing in his face about it already. Anyway, the lads eventually get bored of talking about Goop and their favourite Coldplay songs with this basic bitch, and soon get back to doing some detecting, and just can't believe this killer leaves no witnesses, fingerprints or mistakes of any kind. So they head on over to the secret safe house to try and dig up some leads from that dead lawyer's wife, who promptly just cries a bunch and then tells them that a painting is now weirdly upside down in their flat. And after the boys remove it, they totally find some fingerprints and a weird message inscribed on the wall behind. Not being able to find a match on the database, they have a quick snooze at the station, after Somerset bores them both to sleep, waffling on about how pointless policing is now, and how no one ever gets punished properly in shit. Though I can't really fault him for that, to be fair, or given bona fide pedos in the UK are getting suspended sentences for nonsense kids, whilst patriots get 3 years in jail for saying hurty words online.
What a fucking liberty!
Anyway, speaking of pedos, a little later on Thursday, the police chief finally gets a match on the prints for a guy by the name of Theodore Allen, a one-time child rapist and naughty robber bloke, and so soon gets the entire squad amped up and ready to take him out, despite old Will not really feeling like this is their guy, given the killer seems to have more purpose and prestige than some low-level pussy old street thug. A hunch that soon turns out to be correct, after the cops burst into his gaff and find him dead of malnourishment, and I guess general laziness, underneath the word sloth. And whilst having a chat about how neither have really ever fired their gun before, well except Mills one time when he was fired at as a rookie, and now shamefully can't even remember the name of his pal that got smoked, The detectives arrive to find a bunch of pictures showing the body's year-long deterioration and the corpse hilariously surrounded by air fresheners. But in a shocking twist, what no one could ever see coming, and not least this fella who's about to get the fright of his life, turns out the supposedly dead bloke ain't quite dead at all, and proceeds to indeed give a local policeman the bloody fright of his life.
Fucking hell, you two shit yourselves.
Somerset then begs an increasingly frustrated Mills to stop acting like a pink-haired loon on TikTok still crying about the recent election results and keep on top of his emotions already. Because you're making us look like a right pair of drama queens in front of the local press who've snuck up to take secret pics of the crime scene and shit. A little later, and the doc tells them that super scrawny lazy guy who ain't got out of bed in over a year probably ain't going to survive the night, despite being monitored 24/7 in a local hospital. Cause I guess that's just the current state of American healthcare these days, especially if he ain't got insurance after not going out to work for a year. Also later, Mills's wife Tracy rings up Somerset to ask him out on another date again, given she's super lonely after they moved into this hellhole city and she has no friends or therapists to even talk to yet. So bright and early Friday morning, he meets up with his super hot partner's partner, who promptly unloads all her baggage on the poor sod. And she says she fucking hates living in this grey and gloomy city where trains keep her awake all night and there seems to be a horrific murder happening literally every day this week. Oh, and she's also upset because she's totally pregnant, bro, and don't really know whether she can be bothered to bring a child into this world of misery, murder and utter mayhem. But he just says, chill, bro, because I totally made my ex do an abortion once before too. And just bizarrely says that although he don't regret it and he's super positive that he totally made the right decision, he does now wish that he made a different choice.
Okay.
And then advises her that if she does intend to yeet the sprog back into oblivion, then don't bother telling her hubby that she was ever preggers in the first place. Cause I guess lying and pretending it never happened is totally better than admitting you committed straight up infanticide and terminated his offspring without even consulting the poor fella. Later, Mills just whines about being bored waiting around for a naughty murder to happen, whilst William just scolds him for calling the killer a lunatic and naively underestimating him again. Because lunatics tend to dress up in their granny's nightie and smear themselves in faeces, rather than enact intricate death scenes centred around ultra-specific historical and literary references. Something which soon gives Somerset an idea, and heading over to a local cafe, they end up paying one of Somerset's old FBI contacts for info on library card holders. Because turns out the feds secretly record who checks out dodgy books like Mein Kampf for Roald Dahl, just in case they're a white supremacist or a super dangerous conservative parent who likes reading traditional beloved stories to their children.
Disgusting!
Anyway, they then get a list of names of who's been taking out books all about the 7 deadly sins and Paradise Lost, so they can possibly narrow down some much needed leads already. Which they totally do, and heading over to a suspect called John Doe's gaff, said suspect called John Doe comes home early and tries to shoot him up rather than offer him a nice cup of tea. So Mills chases after the super rude dude and almost gets himself shot up again, and this time rather permanently. But luckily, Somerset scares him off and finally draws his weapon again for only the 4th time in his 30-odd year career, and what is only one day before his scheduled retirement.
No!
So an enraged and impulsive Mills then heads back up to break into the apartment that Somerset tries to remind him that they have no legal right to be anywhere near, given they got this lead on the back of a backhander from his old bureau contact, who in turn searched a highly illegal and unconstitutional federal program that doesn't officially exist. But Mills just says, I don't really give a stuff, mate, because I just got shot up twice by a homosexual in a small fedora, and then almost died in a wet and grimy back alley, and so recklessly just boots the fucking door in.
Oh shit, not good.
Luckily, he promptly bribes a local crackhead to say she's the one what called him about some suspicious guy upstairs, which conveniently then gives them the probable calls they need to go search the gaff. And once inside, they realise this is totally their guy, and worse, they were actually once inches away from the fella, given he was the one dressed up as a press guy and sneakily tried to take lots of pictures at the crime scene the other day.
So fucking close.
Once their colleagues have swept the scene and confirmed there's somehow 0 fingerprints anywhere in the whole apartment and not even on the bog roll or doorknob, Somerset starts to come closer to Mills's perspective that the killer is indeed just a fundamental raving lunatic, after he finds hundreds of journals full of unhinged ramblings, all about how he often does a bunch of bad things on the local subway. Not as bad as setting innocent women on fire whilst cops just watch them burn, nor pushing people onto the tracks for shits and giggles like innocent taxpayers in New York have to put up with, but still pretty bad. When suddenly, the killer calls into his own apartment and starts taunting the dopey cops, who tells them that he admires them for finally finding him, and how he's now going to rearrange his future killings after they compromise his current hideout and shit. After finding a pic of a local prosy in his flat, they head out on Saturday morning after tracing her to a local sex club, where it turns out she's had her back blown out, but not in a good way. So they take in the traumatised suspect, who reveals that he was forced to don some kind of kinky yet super deadly bladed strap-on dildo thing and screw her till she gushed. But gallons of blood rather than fountains of girl juice. Now lust has been ticked off the list, the boys realise only 3 more scenes are left, and so head on to the local boozer to chat about why Somerset is so damn jaded and Mills is so fucking naive all the time. But Mills just calls him out for supposedly retiring, when really he's just using it as an excuse to quit and give up on the world, before heading home to snuggle with his super hot wifey bird, whilst a super lonely Willy boy just lobs a bunch of darts at the wall with some sort of 1,000-yard stare after not being able to sleep. Now on Sunday morning, the killer calls into the National Switchboard to tip the authorities off on his latest naughty murder, where it turns out he's cut the face off of some young vain tart and written pride on the wall. Naturally, given it's so close to the end, the copper who's supposed to be retiring today practically begs his partner to keep him on a few more days till they can finally nail this crafty bugger. Until said crafty bugger turns up at their station behind them and totally surrenders.
What?
And they just can't believe the naughty murderer killer has totally just given himself up anticlimactically after a week-long cat and mouse game, and before we could find out if the detectives could outsmart him or not. And it's even more of a cock-teasing letdown than when the Riddler did the same exact thing at the end of the second act of the latest Batman movie.
Oh, really? That sucks.
After realising this fella is so cunning and crazy he's cut off his own fingertips to avoid leaving prints, and also never leaves a paper trail of any kind, they try and work out what this nutter's game is, given he's still 2 murders away from completing his ultimate masterpiece. So his lawyer promptly tells him that he'll make a full confession and take them to where the last 2 bodies are stashed, on the condition that only the 2 main detectives escort him on the journey. Or else he'll plead insanity and get off scot-free, without them ever finding the last few victims or ever completing the case. And poor Somerset will be stuck throwing darts at a bloody wall and never being able to sleep again.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
So naturally, they can't help but agree to this soy boy's demands, and are soon driving out to some isolated spot in the desert, whilst the killer talks about how his glorious masterpiece is almost complete. And before you can say, this'll end well, he continues to taunt the cops by telling them some hard truths, and once again bollocking Mills for still continuing to underestimate him, and simply thinking he's a bog-standard raving loony boy. 'Cause all them victims were in no way innocent, bro, but in fact disgusting sinners who deserved what they got. And turns out he did all this because society has become numb and way too tolerant toward outright sin and blatant degeneracy, given there's now straight up porn in school libraries and drag queen story hours somehow a thing all across the West.
Oh, hell no! No!
Anyway, he reckons he's going to be a total legend after this all goes down, and further gets under Mills' skin by bragging about sparing his life that one time in the alley, and how he weren't able to catch him fair and square and stuff. Once at the specified spot, they get Johnny Boy out of the car but find nothing, until a random van pulls up and drops off a package at 7 PM. And after letting the driver go after finding out he was just paid 50 buckaroos to deliver it here at this time, Somerset anxiously opens the box, whilst the killer quietly confesses to a bemused Mills that he's been secretly envious of his cosy romantic life with his cute wife all along, and secretly snuck into his apartment after he left for work to try and play domestic with Tracy, before casually eating it and totally decapitating the poor broad. And Willy Boy just can't believe he was delivered Gwyneth Paltrow's noggin in a small cardboard box, and bringing a whole new meaning to receiving head. Meanwhile, an increasingly cruel Doe then proceeds to taunt poor Mills by saying exactly how he posed as pressed in order to buy his personal info from his careless corrupt colleagues, and further goads him to kill him and become Wrath, aka the final sin. Naturally, trying to process how this Kaiser Sose looking fingerless fella has ruined his life by beheading his wife and also aborting his kid what he didn't even know about till right now. A revelation so egregious it even makes poor old Willy smack a bitch up. But unfortunately, Mills still hasn't learned how to control his emotions, and just ends up playing into the killer's hands and completing the masterpiece, by lighting him up and emptying a full clip into his crafty ass. Or crafty torso, I guess. And we end with a traumatised and pretty legally screwed Detective Mills being taken away in the back of his own police car, while Somerset tells his police chief boss that he's totally defo retiring now, though will still be around just in case any more nutters decide to do some more bizarre ritualistic killings and shit. As a slightly more optimistic Somerset then concedes that he now thinks that the world is actually worth fighting for, despite the killer just showing them quite clearly how it's totally not, as he and his boss just walk away under the setting sun. And just can't believe Kevin Spacey did a bunch of crimes he's yet again getting away scot-free with. Allegedly. And that's it. That's the movie. Though my favourite part was when the police boss, played by the iconic drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket, takes a minute to answer the phone just to say,
That's not even my desk.
But anyway, that's a plot and that's your lot. Considering that bell thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Tell me if you liked this flick in the comments if you have time. And I'll investigate a crazy killer randomly basing his crimes on the 7 deadly sins with you in the next one.